Hello and welcome to another episode of Axe of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me as always, my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
Hello, Kat. It is, almost the end of September. Oh, is that the song day? Do you remember? Or is the 23rd of September?
The 21st night of September.
There we go. Yep. Yay, we did it. Yay.
Officially, it's fall, baby. We're here.
Too humid for fall.
Is today the equinox? Autumnal equinox?
Autumnal equinox.
Autumnal?
Autumnal.
I can't do leg day. It's the autumnal equinox.
My autumnal equinox broke.
Also joining me, my equally lovely co-host, Poe.
Yeah. Poe is down there. He's got thoughts today. I'm also ostensibly on this podcast. I'm Eric. Hi.
Yes, that's Eric Van Allen. And this week we're here to talk about the big news of the week. Pokemon and Nintendo.
Pokemon? Oh, okay.
Pocket Pair. Pikachu is here and he's litigious. So we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about it. We're going to be armchair lawyers over here for a bit, joining the rest of the internet, who all suddenly have very strong legal opinions. So please look forward to that conversation. We'll also be sharing our impressions of Dragon Age Veilguard. I got a chance to play it for IGN. Eric got a chance to play it for Destructoid. And we're going to be talking all about that here. Because we got to see a pretty large slice of it, so those impressions are coming up a little bit later. We'll get to all of that in a second, but if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on a podcatcher of your choice. It frankly brightens our day, and it really helps the visibility of the show to have good review scores. Also, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where for just $1 a month you can get access to the show ad-free, and you get access to our Discord, and we have other tiers as well, including the Stars of Destiny tier and the $10 tier, whose name escapes me at this time. We came up with very clever names.
Winterhold,
yeah.
Winterhold, yeah.
Very fitting for right now.
Indeed, but they're very cool, and we are getting ready to do the next Pantheon vote, because we are in the process of finishing up our first Pandemonium, Tana Chronicles, and the Dark Brotherhood, which will be a very fun episode to do, I think. I also have received a request from one Victor Hunter. Hi, Victor, who's our producer, who is in the process of doing a community play-along right now for Final Fantasy XI, which you can join in. Yeah, do it. Come play Final Fantasy XI with us. So that's all great. And we might pick up the Baldur's Gate 3 stream again real soon. Eric, are you still doing your Final Fantasy VI stream this weekend?
Not tomorrow. I am out tomorrow doing other stuff, doing social things, being a person. But after that, we will be getting back to FF6. We are nearing the end. I'm currently in the Zone Eater. I have been swallowed by the Zone Eater. And boy, let me tell you, that place is kind of messed up. I don't like it. There's bad people down there. There's dudes that just push you off scaffolding for no reason. They're
they're dudes in raincoats.
Yeah, they just like body check you off the scaffolding. It's crazy. Like, dude, we're all inside a worm. You can calm down.
Did you find it like by yourself, or because one of my proudest moments was finding it as a kid.
My lovely chat. We had a little heart to heart. I had to put on my camp counselor voice and be like, look, I don't want to miss things. That's why I will ask y'all, okay, what's a good thing to go do next? But don't tell me what to do next. Don't be in the chat being like, go here, go there. Like, I will ask. We will have a discussion when it comes to it. I had to put on my camp counselor voice and be like,
no. You had to turn the chair backwards and straddle it.
Yeah, there's a lot of back seating in here, but there's somebody who sat in the front seat for your sins.
So
wow,
yeah,
I gotta groan on that one. I'm sorry. I apologize.
So go check out that stream. We stream pretty regularly over on twitch.tv/bloodgodpod, including on Saturdays. in which we stream at 9:30. Well, lately it's been 9:30 a.m. Pacific, but you want to get in there at 9:15 or thereabouts. So you can go check us out. We do a live recording with everybody. Lots of fun. So come on over. Okay. Let's get on to the big news, the big story. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are suing.
Beefing.
They're beefing.
They're
the
beefing
developers of Palworld Pocket Pair,
Big
which
beefy
Nintendo
smile.
said Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringement of its intellectual property rights. And Pocket Pair just said, but we're just a small little independent studio that's trying to bring joy to the world. Oh my god, we're so sad. This was the immediate assumption was that this was over the allegations that they were literally stealing Pokemon designs. But actually, no, it's over patents. Specifically, and people do not know what this patent is, but there is a lot of speculation. Analysts in Japan think that this particular patent that they're suing over is for using a Pokeball to capture Pokemon. Or in the case of Palworld, is it called a Pal Ball? Is that what it's called?
A Pal
Something
Sphere.
like that.
It is a Pal Sphere.
Pal Sphere. I'm sorry. In any event, Palworld does have a similar mechanic, even though it is more of a Ark Survival Evolved style survival game. So this appears to be the patent on which the case hinges as the Pokemon sues Palworld. Thoughts, everybody? Reactions?
I know zero about law, but I have been told by people in my mentions about how suing for similarity in design would be very difficult for the lawyers versus an actual, like, this is a patent, this is what they stole from us. And you have people saying, like, oh, this sets a precedent because Nintendo's going to go after fan games. And it's not great. I'm not saying it's great, but I feel like, and maybe a lot of people feel like Palworld kind of flew really close to the sun and found out. When you have Nintendo and the Pokemon Company against it, you may as well just give it up and say, yeah, you win, bye. It's, I'm not rooting for corporations here, but at the same time, what did you expect? Like, when people make fan games and Nintendo cancels them, I say, like, I totally sympathize with you being mad at Nintendo. Like, you should not waste your time on a fan game if they're going to do that. But in this case, it's like, I have played 10 million, billion, zillion Pokemon clones, and Nintendo has not gone after a single one as far as I know, but those clones all had all had monsters that more or less, you know, you could say they were inspired, but they were also their own creative work. Whereas I swear to God, like, when they announce, like, you know, we're pairing with Sony, and they have, like, their mascots, their horrible, like, Island of Dr. Monroe assembled mascots from Pokemon bits. I'm like, you guys are really just tempting fate here, aren't you? Saying we're pairing with Sony with this Zoroark that has the head of a whatever the hell it is, and the wing, and a Reshiram with the wings. That's all it is, a Reshiram with wings. And
that's just a pork issue. Don't you? You know what a pork issue is? It's normal, right? Pork issue.
It's Magnavox and Storny.
And the one that looks like a yellow Lucario. Oh my god!
I'm just not
that's
surprised.
Just Billy. Say hi, Billy.
Hi,
Lucario. No, Billy, you're supposed to say the other thing.
But now Nintendo has gone out and, like, done this patent thing, which could set a precedent. I don't know. I just feel, but right now I feel like Palworld is like, I don't have a lot of sympathy for what they're going through. Put it that way.
There's like two elements to this, like, and we could talk about the other one later, which is broadly, like, I don't like design, like, stuff, like design patents all that much. It's why we don't have a lot of, like, Nemesis games and stuff, and that's a whole different conversation and other stuff. But, like, for this one specifically, I do think there is an Icarus element to this of, like, yeah, there are a lot of monster catching games out there, but they always kind of find a way to work around it, or they use the systems. There's Bravery Network Online was a game I really liked, like a couple years ago, I think now, that basically used the battle system of Pokemon. Like, it was a turn-based RPG where you had a party of characters fighting against each other, but, you know, they just used other things and other ideas to kind of, like, make it not so Pokemon, and then added their own spins to it. I think it's a mixture of Palworld was pretty blatantly doing we're Pokemon with guns. And also Palworld got really big. And there's something about like when somebody is that big and they're flying in your face with like, we're doing Pokemon with guns. You know, we're doing that. You kind of have to make an example at some level.
It really did push that angle.
It was the media that called them Pokemon with guns.
But looking at their trailers, I remember like a very vivid image where they had like a little squirrel guys in a factory assembling guns, and it's like, of course, that is Pokemon with guns because even the squirrels resembled some freaking Pokemon.
Like the side by side comparisons. You know, maybe they don't win a copyright infringement thing at the end of the day, but you do still sit there and you're like, yes, you just like shaved the serial numbers off Gardevoir and gave it like a sniper, like an op. Like, good job. Like that's cool. What you did. And even the stuff in the game has a lot of like elemental weakness stuff that is very Pokemon adjacent. And you know, as much as it is an Arc game, it is also like very heavily steeped in the idea of catching monsters and using them and fighting with them and all that kind of stuff. So I think it is Icarus in the sense that like flew too high, too close to the sun. Yes, got a little too close to being Pokemon, but also like got really big, really big. Mm-hmm. Tons of players had like, you know, companies like Microsoft out there being like, check out the Palworld trailer in our latest show, which I personally have to wonder like, are they going to be showing up at the next Xbox event or anything? Mm-hmm. Now I'm curious because, you know, does Microsoft want to be like, yes, look at Palworld, the company that's currently in a lawsuit with Nintendo.
I don't think so.
Come check this out. Like, that's
business as usual.
Yeah.
Not really their style.
Xbox was kind of desperate for a win, and Palworld was a little bit of a win at the beginning of the year. So I think they were eager to center them. But so I just want to briefly talk about Pocket Pair, the subject of the actual lawsuit. So it's a studio that has about 55 people. It's being kept sort of deliberately small, potentially because its CEO, who is Takuro Mizobe, wants to be acquired. And this is an interesting person. Mizobe is a former JP Morgan employee. He went from finance into crypto. He founded a crypto exchange, and then he used the earnings to start a game studio. So this is just the starting point of Pocket Pair. And there are rumors of AI usage. Now, this is maybe unsubstantiated, unsupported, but when this game came out, a lot of people were kind of looking at it and going, did they just use AI and run Pokemon designs through it and kind of Frankenstein everything together? There's a lot of, because the similarities were very spooky and suspicious, but Pocket Pair, for its part, was kind of determined to frame itself as small little indie startup doing it for the passion of the game. But maybe it's easy to detect a level of cynicism in what they did with Palworld. As for Nintendo, I mean, we can only speculate at this point on what their actual strategy is. Why did they take 8 months to do this? Well, because they were assembling a case. Why are they going after this? Why is their whole case hinging on this particular patent? Potentially because Nintendo thinks that stuff's going to come out in Discovery. And who knows? Like, we may actually learn a lot of really interesting things about Pocket Pair as they dig into their internal documentation and things like that. Is this bullying with a patent? Maybe, I guess. I do think that Nintendo and Pokemon Company looked at Pocket Pair and saw them firing up a company, an entertainment company that's basically the Pokemon Company International, and said, hell no. Yeah. Absolutely not. We are suing you into the ground now.
I have speculated that, but people were saying that it would have taken them a lot longer to assemble their lawsuits. But maybe they even knew beforehand, like, you know, they had the ear to the ground. So I would say if they were willing to live and let live, they definitely broke with the whole, Sony. We have a media company now with our, as I said, our horrible logo with horrible monsters.
So there are people who are saying, oh, the patent was only approved in August. So therefore, it's this is Nintendo just retroactively filing a patent. This is from a patent that has a parent patent. Okay, so the parent patent is from like 2021. But this is a kind of a smaller, more focused version of that patent. And they're using that as the lawsuit. But there's, I think, specifically pointing to, they're like, well, this aspect was in the parent patent, but we want to break it out and we want to show that, hey, this is our mechanic and we're going to sue over it. Are they justified in patenting game mechanics? I think that's an entirely different discussion. But the fact of the matter is, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are being pretty aggressive, honestly, in going after Pocket Pair, which, by the way, that is a Nintendo hallmark. Nintendo has long been extremely aggressive and extremely litigious in defending its properties. So in that sense, I'm not surprised at all that both Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are going after Pocket Pair.
Yeah, it's making an example, which like we said earlier is like
Nintendo does that.
Yeah, something gets too big, too noticeable, like they're gonna go after it. They're not gonna pursue some indie game that has like, couple thousand players and has some like creature collecting mechanics, because there's plenty of creature collecting, creature training games out there that aren't Pokemon. But like when you start doing enough things and you start flying that close to the sun, it's
like the Jesus Christ Superstar song, "Heaven on My Mind." You got to keep it under the radar.
Yeah,
Jesus is telling you to keep it under the radar, Jesus.
And this isn't even me being like, oh, Nintendo has to do it. It would be wrong. Like Nintendo's going to do what Nintendo's going to do because that's their like value. That's like, it's valuable to them to be the ones selling Pokemon, right? And so if more people can sell Pokemon with the serial numbers filed off, like that's not going to be good for their business. So they're going to defend their stuff. It's just basic, making
I really
money.
think the monsters are just way too blatant. Like, if they had... There's ways to copy Pokemon without copying Pokemon, and they definitely, like, did the whole, hey, can I copy your homework? Sure, just change it so no one notices thing. Yeah.
There was always something very cynical about the way this was designed, using popular characters and putting them into a very popular survival genre. And then you have all these people coming out of the woodwork to say, this is what Pokemon should be. And I say,
want guns in my Pokemon.
Is this what you want?
No. So like we have an episode way back from the beginning of the year where I was like, Palworld's actually got some ideas. And it does. It actually has some like neat stuff in there that's kind of fun to mess around with and to do, and to like incorporate creature catching into an ARC game. I actually had like a decent time with it. I played maybe like 15 hours and then bounced, and I was like, I got what I wanted out of that experience. I know a lot of people played a lot more, but also like it was very much like the actual appeal of it that people saw from the jump, which was like, oh, it's Pokemon with guns, is actually like pretty far removed from what the actual appeal of that game, which is much more like, I'm going to build a base, I'm going to manage resources, I'm going to get things and bring them back, and then I'll go catch a monster. But I'm catching a monster because I want him to like manage my food. I want him to cook food while I'm out exploring, or I want him to like, it was all about like management and stuff like that. So it is a very different game when you get down to it. But yeah,
it was a meme that came to life in video game form and had, I don't know, how would you describe the humor? It's very like schoolyard kind of humor.
It's very like, oh, what if Goku had a gun?
He doesn't need a gun.
Yeah. It's very much like, oh, I'm gonna take this. I was trying to think of like, what if Mickey Mouse was edgy? What if the Rugrats grew up and hated life?
Edgelord sort of humor. Yeah, there you go. When it came out, obviously it was humongous, and everybody was scrambling to cover it. There was a lot of conversations about whether it would have staying power. It did receive a very large update around the middle of the year, I think. But it also, it fell off. It came back down to earth a little bit, but it's still, I think, in the top 100 for concurrence on Steam.
Yeah, people still
so
play.
It's still doing fine for itself for now. I do think that there's an element of... So there are a lot of people who... It's popular to hate on Pokemon. And they are going, at last, Pokemon, here comes Pokemon again. They're trying to bully a company that actually made a good version of Pokemon.
Yeah.
And typical Pokemon company, maybe they should just make a good game instead of bullying these other studios. So there's in the Discords, there's also an element of backlash to the Pokemon Company as well.
For sure. Especially after Scarlet and Violet were just kind of a mess and never got fixed. And I do find the no fix thing like really disappointing. So I understand why people are upset with the companies, but at the same time, it's just not really comparable.
I find the anger around Pokemon so interesting. People get really riled up about it. They get so mad about it.
When I was on I had the quote unquote beat for Pokemon when we were still doing US Gamer, and I have never encountered such a toxic, negative fan base.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say. Like, I know a lot of you just want to have. I don't know how Joel does his thing. Like I said to him, I don't know how you do your. People are like accuse you of being like the Illuminati or something. It's ridiculous.
You have a lot of kids who play Pokemon early, and then they become teenagers, and the series doesn't grow up with them.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like. And instead of moving on to Monster Hunter or something like, a lot of kids do in Japan, they just get really, really effing mad at Pokemon. Now, does Pokemon deserve criticism? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I think Pokemon
100%.
Scarlet and Violet was a mess. And anybody who's listened to this podcast for a long time will know my thoughts on Pokemon these days. I have a lot of nostalgia for the series, and I was heavily disappointed by Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I've said that in some ways Pokemon has become like this lifestyle company where the games have been kind of fallen back in favor of, I don't know,
Merchandising.
The thing I am wearing
owls.
right now, my summer Pokemon store merch. Yeah.
The random
good merch.
annual
That's good merch.
stuffy toys that they sell at the Pokemon store that I want to go and get. God damn it! I want their Halloween, whatever their Halloween toy is this year.
The Sitting Cuties got restocked in the Pokemon store. Fun fact.
I think that also, Game Freak taking a little more time with this upcoming Pokemon game is a good sign. Like maybe
hope
they
so.
learned something.
They
I wonder.
never
Legends-
transitioned that well into 3D.
No,
I mean,
No.
but I do
They
wonder
were a
if there's
pixel art
point.
company.
I know Nintendo only has like kind of a stake in Niantic, but of course everyone still not Niantic, Pokemon Company, but people still associate Pokemon and Nintendo very closely. So if they release a crap Pokemon game, which is actually good to be honest, but had terrible like problems that were everyone knows about, how far will Nintendo allow Pokemon Company to do that? Like, you know what I mean? It's just that reputation splashes onto them, and they can't be happy about that.
I think Legends makes sense because it's like an idea of and this is maybe a tangent for we talk about in the news and stuff like that too, but a lot of companies have been trying to like reuse stuff that they, let's use the stuff that we build to make more than one game. And
Yes.
I'm hopeful that Legends EA is maybe them going like, okay, well, we made Arceus. That worked pretty well. People liked it. Probably smooth it over a little bit, work on it, tune it a little bit. Lord knows some parts of that game could definitely use some tuning. But, like, I really loved Arceus. It got me back into the series. And if they just do another Arceus, but with a new setting and all that, and in Lumiose, like, that'll be a good time. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I loved Arceus.
So basically a referendum on Pokemon, which what isn't a referendum on the state of Pokemon these days? There's an even kind of deeper level to this. One that I find a little bit unsettling because it strikes me as a little bit toxic. There are people who are just so mad that Pokemon will not go and do the full Unreal Engine 5 with all of the bells and whistles, crazy open world with all of the regions connected and all of the Pokemon available.
Well, obviously.
And when Pokemon puts out the games that it does, that specific element of the fandom goes crazy. And you can see it in how people go, I just modeled Pokemon in Unreal Engine 5 in like 5 minutes. See how easy it is? What you doing, Nintendo?
So
God,
great.
they're just here to steal all our money. Lazy developers.
Well, see, now the new step of this that's even more cursed is I put Shenmue through an AI thing, and now it looks.
God, did you see that?
It was cursed. It was so bad.
Oh
it was the
my
worst
God.
thing I've ever seen.
I saw the same thing once with the Final Fantasy VIII trailer, and what they did to Kyros, oh my god. It's just
the FF8 AI trailer
no one should
is
see that.
so
Yeah.
bad. It's
That was
Look.
a disaster. What did they do to my son?
I look at that, I'm like, an acre of rainforest died so you can make this. Rethink
This is why
your
we're
life
firing up
choices.
3 Mile Island again. This is why we're going to risk another meltdown.
This is why we're
Thanks,
booting
guys.
3 Mile back up.
Just use a cold reboot. It'll be fine.
I have my own wishes for what I wish Pokemon were. I wish it had a lot more solo content.
Yeah,
honestly,
same,
that was fun to play through. I don't like the direction of the actual raids. I do wish that it were a lot more polished. I think Scarlet and Violet were actually a huge step back from Sword and Shield, even, which itself had a decent number of problems. I think this company struggled really, really hard when it came to working on the Nintendo Switch. And folks, it's not always just a matter of hiring a lot more developers. It isn't. Like, there's a lot of complications that go into actually making a really good video game. And let's not forget that just 4 years ago, there's a little thing called COVID, a freaking global pandemic that every company, including the games industry, really struggled to deal with. And Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out. Did it come out 2 years ago? It was 2 years ago at this point.
It was definitely like
yeah.
prime territory for COVID after with this game, and that's why it has problems. So
Big
I understand
time.
that completely. I think they should be tutored by Monolith Soft.
Oh yeah, I mean, Monolith Soft does a lot of stuff, but Game Freak is not owned by Nintendo. It's not an internal.
No, it's not.
Studio,
But Nintendo should lend them.
But I do think that
Yeah.
like the ending of Scarvi, which I keep talking about, which is so good, has like
That's what you
big.
keep saying. I can't get to that point because
You
I
need to get
just
to.
cannot
You
stand
need
to
to.
play this game.
I'm
You need
still
to.
saying,
I just
okay, you know
want
what?
I want you to see what it is because it's such a cool thing that they do, and it feels like Monolith Soft stepped in and was like, what if we did like a Pokemon game? It has Xenoblade Chronicles vibes to me, and like that's kind of amazing to see Pokemon do, and it made me go like, okay, this seems like the natural path forward for this series, like what would make sense.
As we record this, we are really on the cusp of seeing the Switch 2 be revealed, and I want to put down money that I still think we are getting the unfucked versions of Scarvi unfucked editions for the Switch 2.
That'd be great.
It's gonna happen.
Scarvi.
No, I
unfucked.
think I
Money.
think the Switch 2. I think the Switch 2 will not be that different from the Switch 1, and it'll
No, it
have
won't.
backwards
That's fine.
compatibility, and you'll just be able to play Scarvi on it, and it'll actually run at a decent frame rate.
Maybe
in
they'll
which
enhance
case,
it.
you might actually finish it. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
I think the
But-
Switch 2 is going to be two Switches stapled together.
Able together. Yes. About time.
We'll
It's
duct tape
twice
Gorilla
as
Groot.
powerful.
Bring
the
out
Play
the
it
Switches
Gorilla's
duct
back.
taped together. Talking
Lordy.
also about Pokemon, like I was kind of deriding it as a lifestyle company a little bit, but I have to say, I really love the art of Pokemon. People like to goof on, what is this weird Pokemon? But somehow they have this superpower of taking even really unappealing Pokemon, like a literal pile of garbage, which feels like an internal
Yeah.
challenge by their
Yeah.
tech, and making it cute. When I was in Japan at the Pokemon Center a couple years ago, they had Gardevoir at the cafe with the little chef hat on, and somehow that was appealing. I don't know how.
And that's
Gardevoir-
disgusting when you think about it.
Yeah,
I'm a
Gardevoir-
garbage pile cooking for you. I have like 50 Ratatouilles on me.
Yeah.
The art in this game, the art from the Pokemon merch specifically, is often wonderful.
It's
and
often
recently, their animated shorts have gotten better and better. They consistently put out just really, really cute monsters. They're best in class at that, at making merchandisable monsters these
They
days.
are.
That's their big thing, I suppose. And so in that, I still find Pokemon quite appealing. Like, it's really fun to go into the Japanese Pokemon Center during a season like Halloween and see a witchy Gengar that I immediately want to buy and have in my house. Or getting my friends in Sacramento, they have Pokemon dishware that is like Pokemon fine china. That looks amazing.
This
They
is
have
yours,
these
my child.
Get the good dishes.
Pokemon fine china. Yeah, it's incredible. They have
Mom, I don't want this.
They have these wonderful seasonal decorations around the house. And for so much video game merch, it's really tacky. But in this case, it's actually really cute. It fits really well
Pokemon merch
into
is
their
always
house.
good.
You broke
It's amazing.
That was your grandfather's Pikachu plate. It's been in the family for generations.
He carried this in a plastic bag all the way from Walmart. You ungrateful child.
There's one thing I don't like about Pocket Pair. It's that it's tacky. Palworld is tacky.
It is
Okay.
kind of tacky.
And
yeah.
I look at it and I go, this is your hero? This is your Robin Hood standing up to the mighty Pokemon company? I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for them. There is a real cynical aspect to the way that they crafted this game. And so, yes, maybe there are bad precedents being set here, but for Pocket Pair themselves, I'm a big shrug.
It's like I have had Pokemon clones that I've absolutely loved. Like, what was it, Monster Sanctuary? I think was a really good one, really unique, really had great art. And if like they were going after a game like that, I'd be like, no, absolutely not, Nintendo. You terrible, terrible people. When I look at this, as you say, Kat, it's just like, yeah, I can kind of understand why they're doing this.
I don't like saying like, oh well, I don't like this thing, so it's fine if it gets, like sued by Pokemon or whatever, because again, I do think like the precedent is worth considering, because I do think gameplay patents have been like overreaching in the past, and like there's a lot of discussion that I will leave for like lawyers to actually have, because again, I am not a lawyer. I have to wear that sign whenever I talk about this, but I think of things like the Nemesis system and all that, like the idea of taking gameplay concepts that should, hopefully be iterated on, be open for other creators to work with, instead like locking them down. And I do think it stifles creativity personally.
Yes, for sure.
And so that's what I'm worried about. And like, yeah, it does suck when somebody kind of like oversteps a bound maybe and goes like, we're going to make something that is as close to this thing as we can get. And that's going to be our whole shebang. That's going to be the whole concept. But like, at the same time, is this going to stop other, development teams from trying to make something that might err a little close to the idea of like, oh, we were going to have it to where you used cubes to absorb monsters in the world or something like that. And now they're like, well, that's a little bit too close, so we're just not even going to bother. We're going to do something else, or I don't know, like just not make things. And
yeah,
it's a stifling thing that's what I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, as Max Genius 1984 says in the chat, I'm really waiting to see what Legal says. This is an interesting case. Like, I have to say, most like video game lawsuits, I used to write up a lot of them because that was what you did in games news and whatnot. But some of them are very boring, but some of them are actually very interesting, even if you don't understand all the technicalities. And this is a case of that, I think.
Being someone who pays attention to video games media, you have to like know how to understand like news stuff, business stuff, pop culture stuff. Like, I feel like you do have to be a pretty well-rounded person to cover like games industry stuff holistically. And this is one of those cases where I look at it and I'm like, I have personal feelings on this, absolutely, but also there's an element of this where I'm like, look, I didn't go to school for this.
It's kind of like watching.
Almost step back.
See, a year ago, I was an expert on mergers and acquisitions. Now I'm an expert on patent law. Let's go.
God, yeah, the like year we all had to get really good at understanding how M&A works, because it was just all that was happening in the industry.
The Xbox trial and everything.
I'm glad that I missed all that. I'm just like, I am not lawyering today.
In the chat, Mango Old shouts out, and if you're listening to this later and want to find somebody talking about this, Haley McLean over at MinMax, who was on here not too long ago for the charity stream, is doing a talk and follows this kind of stuff, knows this kind of stuff, so definitely seek some people out who know what they're talking about.
Absolutely. Don't listen to us. We know shit.
In any event, I think this case will be closely watched, and it could ultimately say a lot about how will definitely say a lot about Palworld going forward, because if they lose, and I don't necessarily think that Nintendo is excited to settle, they that could be the end of Pocket Pair, just as a thing. But it could have broader implications for games going forward. So I guess we'll see how this all plays out. I look forward to reading legal documents written in Japanese. That'll be a lot of fun.
Oh boy, your Japanese is good enough for legal for legalese. Come on, guy.
Oh yeah,
that Duolingo owl is showing up right now, being like, "Yeah, you should have kept studying, Eric. Guess what? Time to read
I'm
documents."
good. I can recognize the word zero. That's about it. I'm good.
Watashi wa. Okay, I know what that means.
my colleague
I know some of
Wes
these
was
words.
like, "This is already a really hard case to follow because you're having to go through really esoteric legal portals that are based in Japan, and it's like good." And let me tell you, the Japanese bureaucracy is creaky in the best of times. I'm not
dear.
surprised that you don't. I would be surprised if you didn't have to send a freaking fax in order to be able to access some of their cases. So, anyway. That's it for our discussion of Pocket Pair being sued by the Pokemon Company. I want to hear your thoughts. Send me an email at cat@blookoutpod.com. Come over to the Discord. Participate in the discussion. It was a lively one. A lot of people had opinions on this one. And I think it was actually quite divisive. So come on over and check it out. Okay, it's time now for a series of random encounters. The next Yakuza game has been officially announced, and Majima is now a pirate in Hawaii.
Let's
Yes.
go.
I think it's titled Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. What a great title! I
Yeah,
have to say.
it's like a New York Yankee in King Arthur's court or whatever. It's got all the vibes I want. This is what I was referring to, like saying using things over and over again. RGG Studio has gotten so good at just taking the stuff they build and like repackaging it and finding new ways to like turn it into other things. And this is so brilliant of like Goro Majima washing up, no memory, in Hawaii or like near Hawaii, and it's set kind of after Infinite Wealth, but basically like he just becomes a pirate because why not? Let's do
It seems like a good entry point.
Yeah,
Like, what more do you need to know except I am Majima, I am a pirate, I have more memories.
You need to know that Goro Majima is the most precious boy, and we must protect him at all costs. He is the best. I'm so much more excited for that than the like Amazon like a dragon show. Every time I see the Amazon one, I'm like, oh, that's not going to go well. But
yeah, we got Samoa Joe in there too. Samoa
Yes!
Joe, please come on our podcast. You need to talk about RPGs with us. His favorite RPG is Chrono Trigger. So come on, if you know Samoa Joe, get him on here, please.
I think like this
Amber
is
Alert.
random. This is random encounters, but maybe call it like a mini boss. Or an elite encounter because like I just want to say the way that this series has pivoted from being like a somewhat serious crime drama with like silly side stories on the side to gradually now being like this large property that is just, we know you love these characters. We can kind of have them like get up to crazy hijinks in various different situations. So we're just going to like do that. And that's going to be the story of like a dragon moving forward. It's not going to be
more than 10 years ago. They did a literal zombie survival horror game. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Like I think they hit a point where finally like everybody loves this IP, which they should. Everybody should play the Yakuza games. I think they're very absolutely exceptional. They're very good. But like, now everybody is so familiar with them, they can just go and be like, yeah, we're making a pirate game, or yeah, like our games are turn-based RPGs, and they're like kind of about crime organizations, but kind of not about like the Yakuza specifically anymore. Like it's, the pivot has been incredible, and I love seeing RGG just do so well with the series over the last like 10 years.
It's genuinely delightful. Square Enix admits Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI Profits did not meet expectations. The tale as old as time with Square Enix.
Yeah.
Basically.
Meanwhile, Final Fantasy XVI PC is out, and Yoshi P is asking fans to please not make offensive mods. Good luck with that, Yoshi P. And
How many
continuing
naked
on.
mods?
Sorry,
are
I
there
was taking the pants off of Clive. What was that last one you were talking about?
Continuing on with Square Enix news, Kingdom Hearts 4 will apparently bring the series to a conclusion. Sora can finally rest at long
You
last.
can finally sleep. Finally. God, thank
Dragon's
you.
Dragon's Dogma 2 has
That's Sora's
added a
voice.
casual mode that makes Dragon's Plague less devastating. Might play it now. Echoes of Wisdom's dev has seemingly confirmed to be Grezzo. Shock.
Yeah, I think
They're the ones who made the Link's Awakening remake.
Da, da,
The
da,
PlayStation.
da.
Everybody's a little squirrely today, aren't they?
We are.
always.
PlayStation 6 will reportedly include AMD chips. Intel's actually in a lot of trouble right now. The Nintendo Switch 2's designs have seemingly leaked. Maybe. We don't know. But there have been a lot of Switch 2 rumors of late as people speculate that it is getting into production. And there's a lot of theories, currently unsupported, that we'll be getting a reveal soon. Would not be expecting a reveal this week, but October?
October seems about right.
Perhaps. Seems about right.
I think
That
the
was when
Switch was revealed in October.
Yeah. If you want to go on a little ride, go back to October 2016 and listen to my reacts with Nadia to the Nintendo
God.
Switch reveal.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, those exist?
Oh yeah, it's a time capsule.
Just let's not crumble dust now.
I did posit that the Japanese game development industry would go over to the Nintendo Switch, and I was right.
You were right.
That's
That was a
exactly what
good
they
call.
did. Yeah. So go check it out. And finally, speaking of handhelds and Japanese game developers, Freedom Wars. It's back.
Hell yeah.
It's getting remastered by Dimps and published by Bandai Namco. And it's going to have some nice improvements. It'll be 4K 60 on the platforms to support it. It'll be on Switch, PlayStation, and PC. Vita means life. Hey. And the developers also are talking about making a sequel if you want more Freedom Wars in your life. It was certainly one of the best Vita games. And it's a little bit of that legacy of Sony Japan Studio, which RIP. So
I don't know if it was one of the best Vita games, but it certainly was a video game on the Vita, which gave it like a higher point.
It's consistently rated as one of the best ones.
It's good, but like I don't know. When I think of the Vita, I think of other video games. I don't know. We should do a Vita episode.
What do you think about? Is it Persona 4 Golden and...
Yes, yeah. I think of Persona 4 Golden. I think of Danganronpa, personally, because that's where I played
PS1 emulation.
a bunch of Danganronpas. Yeah, I was going to say a lot of like PSP e-boots and stuff like that, like the ones that you would load up from the store. That was how I went back and played, like Jeanne d'Arc and stuff like that. Persona 3 Portable on the Vita. X. Yeah, no, that was a good time.
Listen to our console RPG quest for the PlayStation Vita, where I'm sure we talk about various other games that came out. I don't hate the Vita. It was a cute little system.
I love my Vita.
I still got mine sitting right over there. I loved playing a lot of PSP games on it. I played Suikoden and Final Fantasy Tactics on my Vita for the first time.
When the Vita and the Wii U had a baby, that's how we got the Switch. Nobody knows that, but it's true. It's nature. It's a fact of nature.
It's true. Back in 2011, when I was getting a Vita demoed to me, I was like, well, wait a minute. This thing needs an HDMI so that I can HDMI out so I can plug it into my TV.
Yep.
And then years later, that's exactly what I got with my Nintendo Switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, technically,
awkward generation.
Technically, PlayStation TV existed, but if you wanted it, but
yeah, like PlayStation TV and all that stuff exists. But I think what the Switch figured out to make this another Elite counter was like the USB-C plug is really useful for that stuff, and HDMI out by itself is not always the best. So like, I love USB-C docking is just fantastic, very good.
Okay, we're rolling into the tavern now, and this is the part of the podcast in which Eric and I talk about our Dragon Age, the Veilguard impressions. We got to play quite a bit of it. I've been doing the IGN first all month over on IGN.com, where my colleague Alex Stedman posted her own hands-on impressions, which I agreed with. And I was like, this game, it's sick. I think that it's going to be really, really good when it comes out. And frankly, it's a miracle. This game should not be good.
I was going to say, like, the tittle-tattle in the background was not good. I did not have hopes for this game, but I'm happily surprised to see heck, good. We need more successes and no more disasters, please.
It should be a disaster.
Well,
if I'm being totally honest, like the kind of game that you just try and get out finally because, for the love of God, this has been in development for years. It's been rebooted. It's all this different things. It's on Frostbite, which does not have a great track record.
Oh, no.
And instead we have this really lovely, very polished action RPG
That's cool.
that seems to be sort of the form that Dragon Age maybe kind of always wanted to be in many ways, especially once it started evolving in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. Thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I mean, everybody walked out of there with this thought, and, you know, some people can be like, you're all saying the same thing, but, like, it's true that, like, look, BioWare was in a bad spot for years. Like Andromeda did not meet expectations. Anthem, we all know how Anthem went. And then, like, before that, Dragon Age is now almost 10 years old. As common refrain, people, it's almost been a decade since the last Dragon Age. So, like, in that time, we've had reports of this Dragon Age, the successor, Dragon Age 4, going through so many different, like, iterations, versions of what it would be, departures at EA and BioWare. All of this would have set up any video game to be a disaster. You look at, like, the Duke Nukem Forevers of the video game industry, and you go, like, how does any game survive this many hands, like, all these people being involved in it? And when I sat down to play this thing, I was like, look, does it boot? Is this a .exe that I can double click on a desktop to play the video game Dragon Age the Veilguard? And yeah, it plays. It's good. Like, it feels like a BioWare game again in a lot of ways. It feels like BioWare in ways that even Dragon Age Inquisition wasn't. Some people have complained about no open world. I think that's great, honestly. I think it feels a lot like the stuff that BioWare was making in the 360 era, your Mass Effect 2s, your Dragon Age 2s, and stuff like that. It feels like it's got all of that back. It's got the companions. It's got great combat, great like you know, combo detonation stuff, which is a hallmark of Dragon Age. It's got, oh my god, it looks gorgeous. The world building's fantastic. I love all the lore heading up into the north and dealing with places like Minrathous and Treviso and all that. The ossuary level that we saw was fantastic. I was hoping for a game that would just be playable, that would just be functional, and be like, okay, we're gonna, like, put something out and then move on to Mass Effect. Instead, like, I'm walking away pretty positive about this thing. Like, it's doing a lot of things that I think BioWare fans are hoping for in this day and age. And you know, we can talk about, you know, comparisons to other games later, but I think, like, on its own, like, this is kind of incredible that it managed to work, that it managed to happen.
Yeah,
That's pretty
PC
awesome.
Gamer called it the franchise's Mass Effect 2 moment. When I say that it was kind of evolving toward this, I mean, as we know, it got started as Dragon Age Origins, which in many ways was it was kind of a original and fresh take on Baldur's Gate 2, I want to say. And over the years, it has definitely evolved in different directions. There have been various attempts to streamline it. There have been plenty of people who say, well, I'll go back to Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate 3 was a success. But it seems to be, at this point, Dragon Age has evolved in a different line. And I'm sort of glad that it's fully embracing the action RPG aspect of it. And in a good way. The combat is a lot of fun, but they managed to layer in a lot, pretty deep skill trees, deep mechanics. It does not feel like Final Fantasy 16, which was an action game. It feels like an action RPG. It's almost like closer to ease than anything else. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the combat, Eric?
So maybe combat is the place where I was a little bit not disappointed. Just like, I think one big thing that people came out of that preview noticing was that, like, it doesn't really seem like your party members have health bars or can go down at all. Obviously, you can't really, like, play as them. You can just kind of issue orders to them. Very, like, Mass Effect.
They do get lost a lot, don't they? when you're in like large encounters.
Yeah, and I think that was maybe like the one bummer for me is that like the difference between Mass Effect and Dragon Age was that Dragon Age felt like you were doing more party tactics on a whole, like going into that like tactical mode and kind of like moving everyone everywhere.
Yeah, because it was a cover
stuff.
shooter.
Well, yeah. And yeah, Mass Effect was much more like we're doing a shooting game. And so this in that respect, this combat wheel, this like party setup feels very Mass Effect, and that's kind of a little bit of a like not a setback, but definitely something I would have liked to have would have been more like tactical stuff and less like or strategic stuff and less
tactical stuff. I mean, for example,
it's mostly
certainly
like
the way that certainly the way that they combo up on their individual attacks and take advantage of elemental weaknesses and whatnot, I think is pretty tactical.
That is there, but then it makes the party members kind of feel like they're cooldown bots in a way that like, okay, you know, like you're gonna stand over there and kind of not do anything until I need you to like hit this button. And so the trade-off is that I think as your own character, you have more to do and more interesting things to do than you've ever had. And I do feel like they finally found the balance between Dragon Age 2, which was way too far on the action side, did not really have a lot of the RPG stuff baked in super well. A lot of people were very critical of it at the time not being RPG enough, versus something like Inquisition, which managed to find like the middle ground. I think this is the right amount of you can do really sick action moves and you have a lot of utility and things you can do, but also you have to kind of think about how you use them, how you want to move around the battlefield, what you're doing on the battlefield. The Spidey sense thing I thought I wasn't going to like, and then I ended up actually liking, so that was kind of interesting, because you can do a lot of cool stuff, like being able to like... I was playing as a warrior to start, right? And so warrior... one great thing they do is they say like, okay, well, warrior, don't choose. You can have your sword and board, or you can have your two-hander, and you just hit a button to toggle between the two stances. So you don't have to like, you know, pre-gear out and choose which one you want. You just have both available to you. So I was doing a lot of stuff where I kind of walk into an encounter, see what the enemies were, and, you know, maybe if it was a lot of little guys, I'd pull out my big axe and start swinging through them, or if it was like one dude and it was going to be a little bit more like of a duel or something, then I'd have like my sword and board so I could do my parries and all that. You do the Captain America throw and hit enemies with it and everything, and you just have a lot of options of what you can do. I think people saw the like ultimate and 3 abilities and were like, oh, it's like narrowing in, and no, you actually have a lot of choices of like what you can do in the moment, and also it makes your attacks and combos feel a lot more interesting and not just like... I love Dragon Age Origins, I do, but sometimes you just walk your guy up and you watch him just go like, that's like very like KOTOR era BioWare of like, I'm watching them stand next to somebody and ha. So like, I think ease is a good comparison of like, you actually do some stuff, and in the actual moment of like dodging, attacking, all that feels like really good to come to grips with and play. It's not quite FF16, like you said. We're not like in DMC territory, but I do think the action works super well, and I like the classes too. I think Warrior was probably my favorite conceptually, but Rogue was my favorite to play because I loved throwing down the lightning flask and then just like stagger comboing a bunch of enemies and just going nuts on the battlefield. I think Rogue is probably what I'm going to run when Veilguard comes out. So
yeah, Rogue seems to be the most enjoyable class to me, just on a moment to moment basis. But I'm always I'm a bow person anyway.
Yeah,
and also I created this rook that everybody seemed to love, so
you did.
People's Rook.
You made the People's Rook.
I made the People's Rook, so maybe I'll remake that character in my ultimate playthrough.
The other thing, my other like main drawback was character creation for the Qunari specifically. A lot of people have been talking about how it handles Qunari. I want some more like craggly bits on the Qunari heads. You know, I want
bits.
Yeah. You look at like the Aeroshock or like Iron Bull.
Craggle Rock.
Yeah, they've all kind of got like craggles, and it looks a little bit like there's a horn coming out of their skull, you know. And in this one, it kind of feels like there's horns popping out of their very smooth foreheads, and it doesn't feel. I want like some more craggly bits. I could not find a way to make that happen. I wanted to make like an Aeroshock style character really bad, and I was
never been a huge fan of the Qunari anyway. I would say that the character that I was furnished with during the IGN first playthrough for the Qunari, not my favorite, design, honestly. It looked a little weird. The Kunari Mage,
Yeah.
I have to say. But, so yeah, I think Craigly Bits is a good description.
Yeah, I want some like texture up there. I think that was the thing. A lot of people see like the smoothed over look and they immediately go like, "Oh my god, Fortnite." But I think for the Kunari, that's like you just want a little bit more texture. I wanted to make like a very like battle hardened warrior, and I could do that with scars and stuff on the face, but it was like up here I didn't have a lot of options, and so I was like, just give me that. The actual horn options are great, like tons of different horn shapes and different, like I could have one lobbed off and one like full, and you can put rings on them and like jewelry, which is really, really neat. I love some of the ornamentation you can do on that stuff, so I did like that aspect of the character creator a lot. But it made me kind of go like, maybe I don't run Kunari for my first one. Maybe I look towards like elves would be interesting. Dwarves might be interesting given what's happening.
You're already thinking about multiple playthroughs, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's a BioWare game, and also like we're probably at some point going to play this for Normandy FM. So like I have to think several steps ahead about who I will play and when. But what do you think about the companions, Kat? Who's been catching your eye out of the companions?
I like Harding. I like all the ladies, honestly. The Veil Jumper, her name escapes me, but Balara is a lot of fun. She very delightfully nerdy, and I just immediately enjoyed having her in my party. I also like Gentleman Necromancer. He's a lot of fun as well. And Manfred, the skeleton that's hanging out with him.
Yeah. That's a good name for
I'm a little more mixed on the Grave Warden.
Oh, I love Davrin. Davrin's so good. Yeah, he's all right. He's a good guy.
I do love the Griffin's cute.
Yeah,
the Griffin
I like
he's a Griffin dad. He's got that big, like, because he's a Grey Warden, he's got that big like doomed to die energy, like, and that's a really just compelling plot line of like, oh, you're cursed and you're dealing with all the ramifications of like being a Grey Warden. I think Grey Warden stuff is like that's classic Dragon Age to me, and I'm glad that we've got a party member who's like really in the Grey Warden stuff. I love that. Nev, I think I'm sorry, like I'm basic. I went right for Nev. I like her. She's got that like detective energy, you know, like investigating in the streets of Minrathous and all that. Also, I love that at every meeting we had, when it was like a very serious business meeting, we're talking about like the mission we're going on, she has this shirt that is like the deepest V you have ever seen in your life, just like blasting chest in the, like, we are in a business situation talking about serious thing, and like she's over here like, well, I think and I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, you know, like, do that.
The boobs
I like Tosh, and apparently she has the steamiest romance. So, yeah. So this game seems to really encourage you to rotate your companions a lot as well, depending on the situation, because they all have different strengths. They all have different kind of elemental attacks. So depending on what you're going to go fight, I spent a lot of time in my demo fighting Darkspawn, for example. You definitely want to roll with different companions, consider how you're setting up your builds and everything. So it does seem as if it's one of those games where you're going to be getting a lot of use out of all of your companions, and you're heavily encouraged to do their pretty extensive companion side quests, which seem to be multi-part quest chains, which is cool. I'm getting a real strong sense that there's some kind of equivalent to the suicide mission in this game for Dragon Age Veilguard. There's been a lot of comparisons to Mass Effect 2, but BioWare has been not particularly subtle in hinting that somewhere in this game you can get into a situation where all of the companions can theoretically die.
So the one thing that we like have, there are a few things we have, like some embargo restrictions, but also just generally like spoiler restrictions around, like vis-a-vis like fates of certain characters and stuff like that. But there is one that I wish we could talk about because it's super interesting. I will just say, like, this is a game where you can make a choice and it will affect the world. Like, there will be a tangible effect on the world. And I was thinking back to stuff like Inquisition and all that, and there are definitely times where you make some cool choices and it ends up taking you on different quest paths, like the Mage Templar thing in Inquisition was really good, or even just like big choices you make in Dragon Age Origins. But I think what surprised me about the way they handled it in Veilguard was they showed us like how a choice you make ends up affecting the world later on in the game. And so you go back through an area, and depending on what you've chosen, that area can be very different. And I think that is like the extent of what I can say about that. And I like that. I think that's really, really cool. And that feels very classic BioWare to me, of like, make choices and see them play out in the world around you. And I'm really impressed by the way they have handled some of that stuff. And if they do more of it, I cannot wait to see it, because that's like that's what these games are ultimately about to me. A BioWare game in this format, you know, in this, they're like Mass Effect, Dragon Age format, is very much about like, let's have some solid combat you're going to have fun in. Let's have some companions you're going to want to hang out with, and let's have a world that feels like you make choices and they're reflected in what you do. And you get to see those choices play back into the story. It's a reactive, like, back and forth, almost like a GM and a player at a tabletop game. And I think they have like managed to find that in a way that's super interesting.
Is this a good like jumping in point if you're just not really a Dragon Age person?
Yes,
Definitely.
actually, surprisingly, I did not think it
Probably
was
the
going to
best
be.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Even
Even though it's a direct continuation of Dragon Age Inquisition in some ways, because Solus is a major villain in this one, and Solus is also in Dragon Age Inquisition, I think that you can absolutely just jump in and start playing. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, Solus, I mean, this was like the big discourse du jour for a while. Like,
Yeah.
Solus, originally this game was going to be called Dreadwolf, which obviously, like, Solus, like, at this point, we're 10 years out from Inquisition, so skip ahead like 10 minutes if you don't want to hear this. But, like, Solus is the oh God, I forgot his name. Fenharel. He is like the wolf. He's the
boy,
dread
if we're
wolf.
getting into the deep lore here.
Yeah. He's the Loki of Dragon Age. Okay, that's like the best way of saying it. Like he is the trickster sort of person who ended up rebelling against the elven gods. And we know that like in this game we are dealing with a ritual that goes wrong, and suddenly now like the elven gods are out and causing all kinds of havoc. And so originally, Solus seemed like he was set up as the big bad, the way that Dragon Age has traditionally done that with characters like Corypheus. Now it's like, okay, Solus is involved in the story, but really it's more about the Veil and things that are happening around the Veil, and these bad guys, which, like, I will say the designs of the elven gods, the bad gods in this new game, incredible stuff. Like, they really cooked with the body horror in this game in a way that I love.
Nice.
But
Yeah, I think it's pretty dark, actually. I think there were people saying, oh, this Dragon Age isn't dark enough. It gets pretty dark.
yeah, but like, that is to say, like, you can probably jump on now without having to play Inquisition and seeing like, okay, who is Solus? Who is, you know, like what happened with the original rebellion? You know, why are these? I do think there's some deep lore that's fun to learn about in there, but like, it also seems like they're doing a lot of stuff in Veilguard to catch people up, so to speak, to give them that information, and then also the places where we found that had new information as well, so it doesn't feel like just a retreading for, you know, sickos like me. I do think Inquisition holds up, if for what it's worth, but also if you don't want to play two really, really long RPGs back to back, I totally understand that decision.
Yeah.
But
I think Dragon Age has historically been trying to be somewhat of a standalone experience. Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition, now Veilguard all have different player protagonists.
Yes.
The previous player protagonists do show up in various circumstances. So the Inquisitor, Hawk, etc. are around the Grey Warden, I think. But yeah, BioWare has always, certainly more so than Mass Effect, has always geared this series toward newcomers who are jumping in for the first time. So even though there's a pretty direct through line to the to Inquisition, the Veilguard, I think, is a great jumping on point.
Awesome. Good to know.
I think for what it's worth too, like, this is an anthology series, like you were saying. It's very like fantasy in that way, where like fantasy books are kind of written to be like, you could read in order, but you could also just pick up this book about D&D and have a decent time with it and enjoy it. It is very like anthology centric, and I don't love the fact that we're not playing as the Inquisitor this time around, just because it does feel like this should be the best chance for BioWare to be like, this is our shepherd moving forward. And that's kind of been one of the main differences between Dragon Age and Mass Effect, was that Mass Effect for 3 games had one consistent protagonist, and it was the story of that character, and people like really responded well to that, whereas Dragon Age, like you said, has always been a different character. And I do kind of like the idea that, you know, all these happenings, all these great stories, every time a great story ends, a new hero rises up. I kind of like that about Dragon Age, but it does mean that like when Rook shows up, you know, we played the intro to this game, you kind of just get told how cool Rook is, and you're like, yeah, you're like these characters are like, yeah, I heard you were doing some crazy stuff back there in, you know, this area, and that's why we recruited you to help out on this mission and all that. And I'm like, cool. I didn't do any of that. I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, sure, great.
I just woke up.
No, I'm good.
I mean, the very first scene with Rook is Rook showing up into a tavern and being a badass.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I'm a badass. And everybody's like, this character's amazing. And we brought them in to help out. And so there's a lot of informed badassery, so to speak.
I mean, that's classic BioWare in some sense, because like Shepard is the same way, where like you pick an origin for Shepard and you get this little like text bit about how like Shepard fought off this giant worm, or I forgot what it was, in Mass Effect 1, where like one of the origins is you fought
the very
something.
first scene in Mass Effect is you have the text explaining the universe in a very Top Gun kind of fashion.
Oh, it's so good. I love that intro.
Pulling back with the voiceover talking about how amazing Shepard is.
Yes, yeah.
I think it does an amazing job of setting the scene, honestly, in the original Mass Effect. It's like, okay, like I understand this character immediately.
I think what works well for me there is that the next mission, you basically gets up like, okay, you're like the coolest human alive, but like you're about to try and enter what is basically the intergalactic interspecies spec ops, right? Like you were trying to be the first human Spectre, and you're on this like mission to be like evaluated by another Spectre. And I think they set a lot of like really good tone setting stuff there. I think with Dragon Age the Veilguard, they do some of that, and there's definitely like dialogue lines where it's clear like this is where the flag fires, where it's like, yes, you're quite good at sneaking around, that's why I recruited you to my team as a rogue. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know I picked those things, like let's move along. But I do think ultimately once it gets going, once you're kind of like past the initial like, oh, we've got to acknowledge those choices in some way, I think Rook then becomes something that you can kind of mold and design and start to feel like it's your own. And that's where Rook like actually starts to work for me, is like, okay, I've got a character that is starting to feel a little bit like mine. I think starting with that tavern choice of like, do you want to fight or do you want to talk, is like a good early, like, how do you envision this character? This character is moldable, malleable. How do you see this character acting in this? And that's when it starts to feel a little bit more like, okay, yeah, like I like this. I also like having a character that is like a mononym, if that makes sense. I love like being like, oh, this is my Rook, this is my Hawk, this is my Inquisitor. I always think that's really,
I like a good character creator, self-insert kind of situation. Yeah. But I played quite a bit of Dragon Age the Veilguard when I was doing the IGN first with BioWare, and the thing that stood out to me was there's the very tutorialized sections early on, but then eventually the game really kind of settles in and starts to open up, and I think that's where it got pretty compelling for me. Mm-hmm. Once you get access to the lighthouse, which is your big headquarters, and your companions start to get settled in, and you start to have a lot of choice about where you can go and you can actually explore and how you want to tackle the world. It's a big meal. It's a really big meal of a game, and I definitely came away, especially once I was kind of settled in with my character and everything, thinking, I want to play more. Like I want to keep going with this one. It's really enjoyable on a moment-to-moment basis. Eric, what areas did you play exactly? Was it the intro kind of tutorial, and then like one of the first sections with like the forest and all that? I
am pulling up my embargo to remind myself of what I can talk about and what I can't talk about. But also, I know I can talk about some of this stuff, which is like, the intro section that we've seen at SGF and all that. we played that.
And we are trying to avoid spoilers as much as we can while talking about this. But, yeah.
The forest, we did some of the forest stuff. I thought that was neat. It was cool. It's fine. Good introduction to like how that stuff flows.
How the zones work and everything, because this isn't an open world game. It's a zone-based exploration.
Right. I did really like literally looking at like the do not mention this. I did like the ossuary, the underwater area that we went to. That was really sick. It's like this zone that is literally underwater, and they're like air bubbles created by like magic and stuff like that, and it looks fantastic. It's visually very interesting. Exploring a bunch of the towns felt really cool, especially like Treviso, Antiva was like very cool to explore and see that stuff. Instead of like open world, it reminds me of Omega from Mass Effect 2. The way that you have kind of like this large open-ish zone where different things are happening. You can talk to different characters, and then like when a quest comes up, when a thing that you have to do pops up, you go talk to an NPC, and they're like, "Cool, let's go down this back alley," and then that like kind of takes you into like where you're going to do the actual mission and what you're going to do, and it kind of sets everything up. So it feels very much like, again, Mass Effect 2 is a great comparison point of. You have these kind of large hub areas that then have like spokes that spin off, and it was cool seeing how like you will go back to those later and kind of like talk to characters, see things evolve as the story goes on.
I like the crossroads.
Yeah,
it's
crossroads is cool.
Where you're going to different portals, but it's not just a fast travel kind of thing. There are story aspects to it. There are things to do in there to explore. You learn a lot about Solus in particular as a villain. So I thought that aspect worked really well. But we've been talking about Dragon Age for a while. Obviously, we're like still a month away until this game came out. But high level, are you feeling optimistic about its chances, Eric?
Very, very optimistic. I think the two big games of this fall for me were always going to be Metaphor and Dragon Age, because that's like two very big RPGs from story developers and all that. But I think where Metaphor is kind of set up to be like successful off the back of a lot of major wins for the Persona series and all that. I think Dragon Age, like we talked about at the beginning, was very set up to not be that. And so seeing this team come out, this team that has a lot of like old talent and new talent, that has been through a lot of development ups and downs, put something forward that feels like BioWare. It also feels new. It also feels like they've got ideas that aren't just like repeating the wins of the past, but it also feels very confident in what it is. It feels like they knew the kind of game they wanted to make, and they just went for that. And I was so waiting throughout it for like, okay, when are the microtransactions going to rear their ugly head? When am I going to see a battle pass pop up at me or something like that? And story's still out on whether any of that gets integrated or not. But like just playing the game that we had in front of us and what it was, I was like, I was thinking about how it has been so long since we have had one of those. Since we've had a game like that. I think like the Baldur's Gate 3 comparison is going to get thrown around a lot, but I see this as a branching point, the way that like Baldur's Gate, they are making a CRPG in the Larian House style, which is definitely influenced by CRPGs of old, but it is very much Larian style, and it has some BioWare-y stuff in the way they present companions and dialogues and stuff like that, but it is very much like a Larian game at the end of the day. This is very much like BioWare making a like Xbox 360 era BioWare game, and it's really cool to see that back, and it's really cool to see them doing it in their own style so confidently. So like, this is what we are going to make again. We're going to make games like this again, and I love that. It feels like they're just making a new Dragon Age. That's honestly the bar I was looking for.
Yeah, there's some tough comps out there with especially Larian, especially CD Projekt. Honestly, there's been a lot of games have come out since Dragon Age last appeared 10 years ago, which is wild. But I think there was a real fear about what was going to happen to BioWare after Mass Effect Andromeda, after Anthem, that it had lost the plot. as a studio that it had kind of forgotten what it was. And Dragon Age the Veilguard seems to be BioWare getting back to what it's good at, which is making character-driven RPGs. It is super duper in the 2000s era BioWare tradition, stemming back to at least KOTOR. And I came away feeling pretty heartened, honestly. This is a studio that finally knows what it is.
That's good.
Again, and it's taken a while. It's been a long time, and I really hope it does well. I do, and it'll be really interesting to play the final game. At a minimum, it looks really good. It looks really polished, very strong, very enjoyable to play. Will it get into the 90 Metacritic range? I don't know, but I do think it kind of screams high 80s to me at the very least. And it looks really dang good for a game that was in development hell for many, many, many years. So
yeah.
Credit to the development team for really taking this project and managing to turn it around. Okay. I also wanted to talk very quickly about a little game that I've been playing that I think is relevant to RPG fans. It's called UFO 50.
Yeah.
It just came out. It's out now. I've got it on my Steam Deck, actually, so it runs really well. So if you're not familiar with this one, it's an imaginary game studio that's making games all through the 1980s. And of different types, sports games, platformers, adventure games. And it imagines this world where there are RPGs for it. Mm-hmm. And it's defiantly old school. It does not try to smooth the edges off at all. I was getting real flashbacks to firing up these games and going, I'm sorry, what do I do? I'm sorry. What are the mechanics in this? Especially the very early ones. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I rented an NES game and had no effing clue what I was supposed to be doing, right, Nadia?
Didn't they come with my place had instruction booklets that they photocopied and gave to us?
But like the Back to the Future 2 and 3 game,
that's
for example,
garbage. That has no
it
point
was
except
pure
suffer.
trash. So many bad licensed games out there. But I think the RPGs, there's one that's underwater. And you could actually pick your party. Well, when you start the game, you need to go to the shop and buy some weapons, because if you just start going, you don't have any weapons equipped. And I thought to myself, wow, this is big Final Fantasy Legend energy right here. And then there's a game that's sort of like Final Fantasy, but with Mario RPG style timing elements and a bit of a Wild Arms setting.
Yeah.
I think it's called like Grimstone or something like that. That's probably the best of them. And then there's a Shadow, what's it called? Shadow Keep for the NES or something to that effect.
Talk about the adventure game?
Yeah. It's a bit wizardry. It's a little bit wizardry, a little bit Shadow Keep, where you're exploring through a maze and there are traps that got smashed by a boulder.
Of course.
But when you're actually fighting, it's more of an action style. So you're attacking different enemies that are flying around and everything. So you can see classic games in there. There's a Pocky and Rocky style shooter that I was really enjoying.
Good old Pocky and Rocky.
But different. They definitely were thinking about how can we kind of reimagine these interesting things. Very faithful to the MSX/PC engine specifically. Style. Big Japanese PC energy to this, and a lot of notable indie developers involved, including the creator of Downwell. It was curated by Derek Yu, who did Spelunky. Really interesting thing. Have you been playing this at all, Eric?
I really, really want to. Most of my time has been on other stuff, but like I played this at SGF over the summer, and I think I walked away saying that it was one of my like favorite games I played there, and I think this is going to sneak up on a lot of people. It's not like the most, it's not a big ticket release, though a blockbuster release, the way that like Dragon Age or Metaphor is. But everyone I know has been like picking this up, playing it, and being like, "Oh, it's 50 games. It's not like 50 mini games. It's not WarioWare bite-sized stuff. This is 50 games.
50 games.
of like possibly more. People are discovering some stuff. There might be more in there, but yeah, it is impressive on concept alone that they managed to execute this at all. And then the whole idea of fictional company, like a collection of games, you know, the way that you have like the Marvel versus Capcom collection and stuff like that. But looking back on like a fictional company and imagining like their evolution of a like secretly like super revolutionary like forward thinking company in the 80s is so cool to see. It's such a cool concept, and they do so much. The one that I've been like wanting to play more than any other, and this is pretty sad, it's called Pilot Quest, and it's like an idle game where you can like
Nice.
it's like a Zelda style game, but it's got idle elements in it, and that
Wow,
seems
I like
so
that.
smart to me. And like you were saying, the Wild Arms type RPG and stuff like that, there's so much inventiveness in it. When I was playing it at SGF, my rule was I had maybe like 15 minutes with it, and I was only going to play a minute each of 15 different games. And
nice.
the breadth of stuff that I saw while I was doing that, beat 'em ups, sports games that kind of felt like Windjammers and things like that, like all these different kinds of games, multiplayer games. I love the one where you have like dudes walking across the screen, you have to kind of like move them up and down. It's almost like an auto battler tower defense type thing. Everything,
That's a good one.
everything is so well thought out. I think my favorite actually is kind of RPG adjacent. It was called like Discronia or something, but basically you have these discs, and they are all like, so you can have like a big ogre or like a little like rat or whatever, and you flick them on the table on the board, and you ricochet them around, and when they hit things, they will do damage to them based on their stats. And they also have stats based on like, you know, how hard they are to flick, how fast they can move and bounce and stuff like that. So someone managed to turn like little table flicking into a tactical RPG with
nice.
you spend money on getting different units and go through a little like Fire Emblem world map and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is brilliant. This is so smart. This is so clever. And I was just sitting, that was the one I wanted to spend more than a minute with, because I was like, I want to get the ogre and I want to flick them at the little guys and watch them all like scatter and break and stuff. And it was like, this is so clever and ingenious. I think it's like low key going to be, when we get to the end of the year, people are going to be like, oh yeah, you know, all these great games that have come out this year, but UFO 50, that's a video game.
Action 52 lives again, except it's good.
Yeah, you know, that was the
because
sales pitch. Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming when you first fire it up, because you see this giant list of games to play, and you are kind of looking at this buffet and going, oh, okay, where do I start? And you fire up these games, and there's literally zero context. You're just playing the games, and you there are instructions that you can look at, and information on how to actually play it. But for the most part, it's really throwing you into the mindset of playing games in the 1980s.
Yep.
There are
that is
cute
big Nintendo energy.
there are cute little bits of history. The Underwater RPG, for example, just notes one of 2 underwater games released that year.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it just kind of really amuses me that they wrote that.
That's quite specific. I appreciate it.
One of my absolute favorite games is Game Center CX, which was released as Retro Game Challenge over here. And I think that's one of the closer comps. And it was developed by, the same people who did NES Remix a little bit later.
Yeah.
And really delightful studio. And the thing that I liked about that game was it was on the Nintendo DS, and it really captured the mood of being a little kid in Japan circa 1986 playing on a Famicom. And the games that it created, which were all original, were not as deep as these, and there were quite a bit fewer of them, but they were all fully formed in their own way, and they were like lovely tributes to Star Soldier. There's a whole Dragon Quest style RPG where you can just you can just sit there and grind to your heart's content. Guadia Quest. And then they got even more ambitious with Retro Game Challenge 2. And the thing that I enjoyed about it was the feeling of advancing of time, how they had the video game strategy guides that you could page through, which in the American localized release was full of references to EGM specifically. So Milkman and Dan Sock, things like that.
Dan Sock,
very, very amusing.
Milkman.
I love everything about this game, and I really like it is almost annoying me the fact that I can't go play it right now because it's just so delightful.
It feels like, on the one hand, a tribute to a specific era of gaming, which in many ways is becoming more and more lost. But also, it feels like an anthology, a heavily curated short story anthology full of really wonderful game developers who were encouraged to just kind of go wild with their imaginations within a certain prompt. And this is the result. I think that if you love old video games, which I do, you have to play this. It's an essential one for 2024. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited about this one. And the RPGs obviously are going to be the headliners for Axe of the Bloodgood, but I like shmups too. And this thing has a lot of quality shmups on it. So, okay. Nadia, you went to the Final Fantasy VII Remake concert?
Yeah, they're having an orchestra. They have a traveling orchestra concert, and Square Enix gave my husband and I tickets. Thank you very much for that. And unfortunately, there's a bit of a snafu, and we missed the first half hour of the show, which was kind of sad because I really wanted to hear the Mount Corel theme, the Go Mount Corel, which is like a really, really rocking, energetic tune. And I kind of had to stand out in the hallway and listen to it there because it won't let you in the middle of a song. So we waited, but it was worth it in the end because heard a really gorgeous rendition of Cosmo Canyon, like live, like. And of course, when you're listening to these shows, you have like the images accompanying it, the video. Square Enix, like I would always easily recommend their concerts. Like every single one I've gone to has been fantastic. My dearest wish is that the Final Fantasy XIV concert I got to see will someday go like become an actual production, because that was one of the best things I've ever seen. But we got Final Fantasy VII Remake, so of course I heard One Winged Angel. Spoiler alert. The guy who conducts these things, I forget his last name, but his first name is Arnie. He's like a real jolly, jovial guy. He's been the conductor as far as I've gone to these things for years. He's got to be sick of One Winged Angel. No one can listen to One Winged Angel that much and stay sane. It's just not possible. But yeah, really enjoyed the show. If it is touring in your area, or if Distant Worlds comes to your area, like by all means see it. Like I can recommend that. I can recommend the Zelda show. Most of all, I recommend the Sonic shows. Those are wild. Like I don't even like Sonic that much, but the Sonic concert was just like, oh my god, all these repressed children are blossoming. This is fantastic. Sonic fans just have this manic energy.
Repressed children are blossoming. The Sonic
fans just have this manic energy. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, so I did that, and I'm also still playing Mana. I think I'm getting close to the end, so really enjoying it. It's just one of those imperfect games, as I've said many times. It's just fun. I like Karina. She's like the sassy, bitchy, southern accent dragon, and I really like Morley. I think he's really cool.
Oh, Morley's the best. I love Morley.
I love how he has a very he has a very suave, like, you know, outer shell, but when something weird happens, he's like, he makes a Tim Allen grunt. It's really
well, we're almost out of time. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's about it. I know we should probably make it quick because we talked a lot about Dragon Age, didn't we?
We're almost out of time, but Eric, did you have anything else that you wanted to throw in terms of what you've been playing?
Nothing I could talk about yet. I've mostly just been poking at other stuff here and there. I did play some Deadlock this week just to kind of check in on how that's going, and it's been interesting seeing that game evolve. It definitely feels like it's got legs, so keeping an eye on it.
Legs?
Yeah, you know, Valve has turned their Eye of Sauron from one game to another, and then is now casting favor down upon Deadlock. And so I'm curious to see what that turns into, because it still feels super weird that it's like high-octane shooter, but also very much deep, rich MOBA in the vein of Dota, and somehow it manages to balance those things. But it's a cool thing, so I keep an eye on that. But yeah, nothing right now. We'll talk more about other stuff another time. We talked enough about Dragon Age.
I'm reading a book.
Oh boy!
It's Jason Schreier's Blizzard book, actually.
Oh yes.
I'm very far through it. I'm like 75% of the way through it. And the reason that I bring it up is that actually Jason Schreier is going to be on the podcast
Hell yeah.
on Saturday, next Saturday, and we're going to be recording a big old conversation about the Blizzard books. So come on over. There's a lot of really interesting revelations in this one that are definitely, I think, makes this a must read if you're a Blizzard fan. And because they have had such an outsized impact on RPG history in particular, a lot of really interesting insights into what happened with Blizzard North, for example, Titan, just how a studio goes from being a startup full of people who were used to work for Kinko's and were hired by their friends to being run by Bobby Kotick. Definitely, the thing that I like about it, and we'll talk about this more, is that it's a very clear-eyed look at gaming history. It does not romanticize it, I don't think.
Important.
And I was just talking about UFO 50. I think that's another game that's a very clear-eyed look at what gaming used to be in the 1980s. This is a very clear-eyed look of what it was like to work at a game studio in the 90s and the 2000s. So definitely go check it out when it comes out, and look forward to our combo with Jason Schreier when he comes on the show next week. Okay, that's it for the tavern. Nadia, take us home.
I have it's not really nostalgia, but it's definitely a pit. Did I tell you guys this? I don't know if I told you guys this story. Did I tell you about the skeleton mask and how I freaked out my father? Because that was really funny. Or is that I told my friends that story. Okay, so basically,
the skeleton mask.
Yeah, as you all know, I was gone for part of August. I went to Otakon, and I decided, hey, you know what? I want to do a really fun, quick cosplay. I'm going to do. Are you familiar with Bookseller Honda-chan?
No.
Yes. Yeah.
He's literally a skeleton who works in a bookstore. It's just a really hilarious manga, and I love it because I love books, I love bookstores, and I like having a look at what retail is like in Japan, what is like working in retail. Because you get a lot of salaryman stories, but not a lot of, retail stories. So I love it for that reason. It's a very simple cosplay. I bought a mask off Amazon, which was pretty good, and I bought an apron, because he wears an apron at work, white shirt, whatever. So here's the thing. I have an Amazon account that I sometimes use to send DVDs to my dad, because he's a boomer. He has no idea how to buy or do anything. So I just have things shipped directly to his house. Now, when I bought this skull mask and this apron, I accidentally shipped it to my father's house. And it has his name on it, right? Because of course it does. And he opens the box, and there's a skeleton mask gazing out at him, and he freaks the hell out. And my mother, who at this point was in the hospital for brain damage issues, is like, it's probably something to do with your daughter. Of course it has something to do with Nadia. Whatever that is. No, someone's out to get me. So he I don't even know why he didn't throw it out, but he put it in the garage. Apparently he was so freaked out by this mask that's in the garage. And I call him later and I say, oh shit, I think you got a package that belongs to me. He's like, oh yeah, I just opened it up and there was a skeleton mask, and I was freaked out. So it's I put it in the garage. I thought so.
Your family's a hoot, Nadia. Seriously.
I had to admit though, that was really
I just imagine
funny.
him opening the box and going, "What? It's a death threat! Go!"
And someone in the back being like, "That's Nadia."
I should have asked him, okay, what did you think the apron was for? Okay, I remember now. He said specifically, I saw the apron, I saw the mask, I thought someone was trying to recruit me to disassemble a body. I'm like, why would you think
what?
Yeah, it's a message.
That?
It's like in The Godfather when they send the fish with the bulletproof vest. Yeah, it's a Sicilian message.
Yeah. So he thought someone was sending you a message, but no, it's just me. I accidentally sent some shit to his house, and that was my summer. Thank you.
And that was this episode of Axe of the Blood God. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your generous support of the show. It's because of listeners like you that we've been able to keep doing this for, almost 10 years now at this point, which is pretty wild. If you enjoy the show and you want to contribute more directly, hey, patreon.com/bloodgodpod. Look forward to our upcoming Pantheon vote. It should be going up on Wednesday as we continue on and get ready to do our first ever Pandemonium with Sonic Chronicles and the Dark Brotherhood. We're heading now into the Axe of the Blood God post show with our Stars of Destiny, and this week we're joined by Anthrax Bees, Criminal Justice, one of our intrepid mods, Drew RWX, Flashback 2012, Harvest Lunatic, Laguna Matata 124, Mango Alts, Robo Riley, and Spyrus. Again, thank you so much for your wonderful support. In the meantime, I've been your host, Kat Bailey. Thanks so much to Victor Hunter for producing this episode. We'll be back next week. But until then, from Nadia, Eric, and myself, thanks for listening and happy adventuring.